National Park, to transportation infrastructure, to many tribal and economic development issues. So you got a lot of great partners there in the region. One of the things a couple things to mention is that we, in passing of the infrastructure bill, did something for the very first time from the transportation sector, which was to try to focus on what we're calling salmon infrastructure. So much of what we've done in the past in our road development has put us at disadvantages when it comes to culverts. So this legislation actually, so Clallam County, you could say, is almost like the culvert capital, with so many projects that could get assistance and funding. So we hope that this new program for our state will help Clallam County, and that people will look at that culvert funding and look at some of the projects. I know there are projects in various parts of the county that could be used. Also, in the infrastructure bill is money for bridges, and you have many besides the highway coming through there, that we have so many structural deficiencies in our state that we think that some of this transportation infrastructure dollars could go to bridge repairs and particularly help with funding. So we want to make sure the county and the state are thinking about Clallam County in that regard, like 101 bridge over the Solduck River and the Highway 112 bridge over the Bullman Creek. Both of them we know need replacement. We think that that's a big investment. Also money for airports. So Fairchild could get resources to help maintain the runway and taxiways there. Obviously a continued growing effort by the community for air service. And we want to make sure that they take advantage of the infrastructure investments that they can make to help keep the airport in the best possible conditions. And obviously Clallam Transit, there were dollars there for about $5.2 billion in competitive grants that people could look towards to help improving their fleet moving forward. Secondly, wanted to mention that we are pushing for another round on restaurant infrastructure, helping them. So many of our restaurants are key to our community's economic development. They are the places that hold our community together, speak to our community, attract visitors to our community. And in the last rescue plan, only about half of the restaurants that applied for funding got funding. And we, in a bipartisan effort with my colleagues, Senators Cardin and Wicker and Collins and myself and others, are trying to, in the next several months, get a second round of restaurant funding that would help these businesses who've been hard hit by COVID, hard hit by rising prices, hard hit by just the impacts of continued loss of customer base. I guess the best thing to say is, in particularly in the Olympic Peninsula case, of a through traffic of people who continue to visit has been slowed down immensely. And lastly, just wanted to mention that that work I mentioned at Olympic National Park. We worked very hard in the lands package that we did to really, for the first time in many years, upgrade our infrastructure. So there are improvements at Hurricane Ridge that will get done, enhancing the park's ability to continue to operate in a successful way and attract more people in the future with these improvements. So want to hear really from you guys today about the things that are on your minds, but wanted to tell you that these are things that aren't far from our minds, and we're always thinking about them and always thinking about Clallam County needs and how these federal policies fit within the framework of what the community is pushing for and needs. So I didn't touch too much on the healthcare side, but we've done that in some of our past visits to Port Angeles and to other places. But if that's a subject people want to talk about, but you guys have done some pretty innovative work there and continue to grow your healthcare infrastructure. And we're really proud of what you guys do in that regard. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Colleen. And again, thanks for the opportunity, and look forward to hearing what's on people's minds or answering any questions.
Wonderful, thank you. So it looks like Tina and Eric Thompson have a question. They are the owners of Tedesco's Fresh in Sequim. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Senator Cantwell. It's an honor to meet you on even in Zoom. It's pretty cool. So they asked us to kind of touch on some of the things you talked about in your opening, because we are an important place in the community. I mean, everybody gathers there. You can, it's places to be seen. It's for special occasions and family and friends, of course, and we've struggled a lot through this whole thing. And you identified briefly some of the things that we've dealt with, but staff shortages being one of them. And most recently, the biggest hurdle has been inflation. I mean, some of our pricing is like 200% higher than it was currently. We've increased expenses with to-go packaging, creating outdoor seating venues. We've had to give bonuses and pay increases to employees so they don't bolt to other employers who are looking for the same help at higher wages. And then, all the policy changes we've had over the last 2 years have greatly cut into our revenue stream, as you have kind of outlined. So, and Tina brought up, is there a timeline for some of this relief in this second round of restaurant funding, and what do you think that'll look like? And we applied for the first round and did not get that one, unfortunately. So what's that going to look like for us that have been involved in all this, and how do we keep moving forward? Because there's really, the struggle is still ongoing, even with some relief in sight. So thank you for your time.
So I hear you, and we heard that a lot yesterday from restaurateurs around the state. We had a roundtable with, but the issue is, I've been a member of the Small Business Committee since I've been in Congress. So I get this is where major job employment is for the United States. We had hoped that as we were talking about this Build Back Better program, that we would get this support and get it included. Unfortunately, it didn't get included either in the infrastructure package or in Build Back Better. Now we really want to prioritize it in the next 2 to 3 months for an additional $60 billion. The first round was about $30 billion. And immediately got absorbed by businesses and left about half of the people in our state that would have been, that were eligible when they applied without being accepted to the program. There's just an subscription of people who needed this resource. The reason why we think we should come back to it is because my sense is that many of these restaurants have, you're way overextended. You have no more capacity. You've used every trick, every tool you could, every leverage of your own financial schemes, anything that you could do to keep your business open and running. And we're just not through this. And you've had to, as you mentioned, deal with a workforce shortage and also higher prices. So we think if we want to keep this infrastructure, this restaurant infrastructure in our economy, we're going to have to do more. So we're hoping that in the next 2 months that we will find another legislative vehicle in Congress that we can include this package to. We're working with some of our colleagues who, some of them want it all paid for in a, from a government perspective. And there could be some differences, but right now there's about 6 to 10 of us in a bipartisan effort working on this. And we do have the commitment of, the House and Senate leadership that they want to do it. We're just trying to raise everybody's voices on this about really understanding that tight squeeze that you've been through and continuing to go through. And the Omicron, there was a survey yesterday by the National Restaurant Association that said things are worse now than they were 3 months ago. And so no one is feeling like they're out of this crisis, and no one is feeling like even if there was daylight there that everything is resolved. These precarious positions that you sit in need some financial relief.
Okay, great, thank you. I know TJ Green, the chair of the Makah tribe, had a question as well. Chair Green?
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's great to be on the call with everyone. Senator Cantwell, thank you for joining us out here on the West End. I know you're really familiar and have paid regular visits out here. We definitely appreciate you taking the time to do that. It's important that these rural areas, that you see that firsthand as you've done so regularly throughout your time in office. So we appreciate that. You're very familiar with our roads. We got one road in, one road out for a lot of these communities, Nia Bay, Clallam Bay, CQ, the communities of Bowman Beach. And one of the key issues facing, the peninsula is a long-term solution for Highway 112. It's often closed due to landslides. It cuts off the Makah tribe, Clallam Bay, CQ timber movements. The timber industry is an important industry out here. The Clallam Bay prison, there's a lot of people commuting on those roads to and from those communities. The United States Coast Guard station, as well as the school district that's there as well. The highway is still closed now due to flood events in November, and may not be open for several weeks, up to a couple months here. So what funding is available to help us find a solution to this issue?
Well, one of the reasons why we put such a focus on the infrastructure bill is that we are so behind. And then we also, at long-term infrastructure investments, we also are seeing so many more of these weather events that are really literally cutting us off from, our communities. And we have to make those improvements. So there is a program called the RAISE Grant Competitive Program that I hope that the state and the county and tribes will work together on to seek money to make those repairs to the highway. Obviously, that is a critical part of infrastructure, as you just mentioned, for all of those reasons. The Coast Guard, the continued economic opportunity for tourism in the area. So we need, it's a critical part of infrastructure, and we need that road repaired. So that is something that we need to do right now in applying for that. And so I think the county's doing that. I think the community, but we'll follow up with a team of people to make sure that that is happening. But there is, this is the largest infrastructure investment in a long time. It's way overdue. I mean, there was a report that showed that we had lost as a percentage of GDP. We had been at like the lowest point since, basically 50 years on the level of investment as a percentage of our GDP. So we're now getting that investment back up, and we just have to take advantage of prioritizing these projects within our state and why they're so important. And I would assume that Highway 101 and Highway 112 are basically the top priorities for the community and should be able to get funded.
Thank you, Senator. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. And just so you know, I was out hiking on your coast this summer and had a great time. So
excellent. Welcome anytime. Thank you.
I know Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Randy Johnson has a question.
Well, a couple of questions. Thank you, Senator, for being here. And as TJ so nicely stated, the whole issue of Highway 112, 101, those of us who think about the entire West End being potentially cut off, it could be critical to all those citizens, I mean, as well as a lot of other infrastructure. So thank you for highlighting that. That's certainly on all of our local radars, no doubt. Along with that, the whole issue of broadband, which just, I think this pandemic's made it so clear that those people that are unserved and underserved, whether it be relative to education or the myriad of other things, is just going to continue to be, as people keep saying, it's the electrification we need in this country. And then I'd also like to thank you for, again, going back a little bit, the whole ARPA funds, because whether it was to help businesses or childcare or just the whole bunch of other things that are the money we've dispensed. I mean, we're making some changes in things like food banks that were needed before, but finally are being made, and it just became critical to our community. The one thing that we were, when we were talking to Representative Kilmer yesterday, and the whole issue of funding, for infrastructure. We have a major project that we've been working on with the city called our EOC, Emergency Operations Center, and 911 Center, that we've been working on and starting to fund. The reason being that they're both in locations that if we have any kind of major earthquake, it'll all come tumbling down on top of us. And we went through the infrastructure bill, and being honest, I couldn't see where there was a good fit, if there is one. So I'll just put that back out to you and or your staff if you happen to think about that. But again, thank you for.
Yeah, where would it be located, Commissioner? What would you have it do, and what?
Well, both the 911 centers now located at the city, and again, it's in a seismic area that would come down. The 911, the EOCs in our county courthouse, which also probably come tumbling down, is less than stable where we are, and we're going to locate to a safe location, which is out at our airport together, because it's just going to be a critical thing if we ever have a major emergency like that. So, and again, we've been working on that with compliments of some other folks on this call for a while. Where do we locate? How can we be safe? And again, it's a kind of a different change than what we'd been thinking about before, but certainly one of those necessary things we need here in the county. So
what do you think the cost of relocating that is out to the airport?
All together, I think for both sides, something on the order of $12 million.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's look at that. It is, as you said, it's not like there's a specific category that we can point to at this moment, but I do think that this is, a huge priority. I think just all of these events, fire events, flood events, all these things have made everybody much more conscious of the fact that we have to have a communication system that will stand the test of that, because it's the hub of that response and the hub of communications to the community. So I think we should figure out where within either FEMA dollars or other infrastructure dollars there is some broadband 911 support dollars. Maybe there's something there, and we will look at that with you.
Wonderful, thank you. This is maybe a very productive call. Cindy Brooks from the EDC Team Jefferson, my partner organization on the North Olympic Peninsula. Cindy, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Colleen. Nice to meet you, Senator Cantwell. I imagine that all of us are experiencing some form of a great unraveling challenges that we have. Before us that really demand a different way of thinking. And one thing that has concerned me is how traditional economic thinking and business development tends to look at things in silos rather than as interconnected. So I'd like to bring up the topic of salmon recovery just as an example. Salmon, of course, are a really important species for the North Olympic Peninsula. Salmon recovery will affect business, obviously, but the way we have been thinking about it is, fisheries and aquaculture are separate from forestry, which is separate from manufacturing. And I'm just wondering if we're trying to recover a species that's so critically important to this place and the people in this place, both currently and historically, I wonder how government and how we can think about salmon recovery differently to actually be successful in our endeavors.
Well, I think, first of all, very influenced by, your region, by both Ron Allen and TJ in those two organizations, and the communication, I would say, across our state on how problematic culverts had become. And when you think about the ability to enhance some of these things, there's a project that we got done with the help of the Federal Railroad Administration, just up I'm right now in Edmonds, Washington, but up at Meadowdale Beach. perfect example, the railroad came through there and blocked the salmon's ability to migrate up into those creeks, and it was just really bad engineering from the salmon perspective. Now with that investment, they are revitalizing that park in that area. I mean, it's not only just an improved habitat for salmon, it's improved habitat for people and visiting and enjoying our coastline and enjoying that experience. And so I do think that the culvert aspect is an important aspect. It's not the only aspect. I think, you know, for us, we are challenged with this dual problem of we have a changing climate and environment that is really costing us a lot. Really, I mean, it's in the billions of dollars every year. And so we are now trying to figure out what are some of those adaptation and mitigation strategies that can help us. And so we have to listen to that science. And we're also trying to upgrade our weather forecasting ability. One of the things I know the Peninsula counts on most is great weather forecasting. So much of your industries and sectors, and we worked long ago to get a new Doppler system out there, but we still don't have state-of-the-art weather information, and we're not really calculating. I mean, you hear all the time about the European model. When you're listening to the news and they're saying, well, here's what the weather is, but then they say, well, here's what the European model says. That means because the Europeans have put supercomputing time behind the information. So I think that we have to upgrade our weather forecasting information system, so we also have a better sense of what we're going through, what really we're going to go through, what kind of problems we're going to face, and hopefully then do better adaptation and mitigation strategies. But I'm convinced one of the things that, I mean, obviously besides having the national lab out there, and they do tremendous work, the work that the community is doing and trying to be a leader on composites and working with composites and CLT, so cross-laminated timber. I feel like there's like just this, people probably don't even really know what great work everybody's doing, but literally groundbreaking work on trying to figure out how to take advantage of more lightweight materials from a recycling perspective. That's what the composite recycling efforts are in the county, and trying to be a leader in that. And then also trying to see if there's some way to marry that with cross-laminated timber, which is also a better way to store carbon, and we think has huge potential for us. Is there's two ways to marry those things together. Well, that's such cutting edge research on just being better stewards that I think can help us. So the reason I'm tying those two things together is because sustainability sectors are going to grow immensely. Any business that is about sustainability is just going to be a big economic opportunity. And I hope that helps us, right? Get better information about what we're going through, marry it up with better economic opportunity, but get really good data so we can make those important decisions we have to make.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. We probably have time for one more or so. I see Marcia Macy from the Olympic Peninsula Visitors Bureau has had her hand up for a while. Marcia.
Thanks, Colleen. And thank you so much, Senator Cantwell, for your tireless hard work on behalf of all of us Washingtonians. It really is appreciated. I was happy to hear about the transportation package as I'm sitting in line waiting for a ferry, and we are very dependent on our ferry system out there as well. But my question concerns outdoor recreation, the outdoor recreation sector. You mentioned Olympic National Park, and of course, the Olympic National Park is the 9th most visited national park in the country. We've seen tremendous uptick in outdoor recreation, especially these last couple of years. And I'm just wondering what Congress is or can do to better support our outdoor recreation economy.
Well, we passed just a couple of years ago this major reform where we made permanent the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and basically make sure that the funding also went, the funding was actually there in the budget the way it was supposed to be, as opposed to being put into general fund. And the things that were identified out at Olympic were about 7 million of rehabilitation to Hurricane Ridge from roads and trails and facilities within the lodge itself. And so people don't understand you have to upgrade the infrastructure if you want to keep the facility attracting people. So this was the biggest investment. Our whole efforts are to try to communicate to people that the outdoor economy is third behind finance and healthcare. That's how big it is. That's how big its economic impact is to the United States. And so the more we can invest in those public lands opportunities, the more you can grow businesses around that. And that's what we're seeing, that it's also become a major employer. The number of recreational businesses, whether that's hunting or fishing or hiking, or just people who want to drive up to Hurricane Ridge, it's all an impact. So what we're looking for now is making sure that those dollars get spent wisely and those investments get made. And then what else can we do to encourage more of that economic activity, communicate about that economic activity, in our park system, so that people understand what those, almost promoting, if you will, more diversity in our consumers who are traveling to our national parks.
Wonderful. So it is 8:30, I see, and I know Senator Cantwell had a hard stop at 8:30. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. There's, of course, a lot more questions and people have their hands raised. Would it be okay if we make sure we get those questions to Casey and he can communicate through you?
Yes.
To you about those? Wonderful.
That would be great. Or I'm happy to call people later today. Really appreciate it. I know you have other speakers too, so but really appreciate everybody and the opportunity. And thank you for, again, being such a great EDC and Colleen, your leadership. We have so many special parts to our state, but clearly you guys live in one of the most beautiful, special places. So thank you for
great.
To grow that economy and for your work in so many different areas.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So I know I saw Darlene, Jim, and Matthew. Casey is on the call with us. He is the Olympic Region manager, representative. So if you'll put number and email in the chat, then, or you can do it directly to Casey Duff. He will get back to you. Right, Casey?
That's right. We'll be in touch later this afternoon after the call with to follow up on these questions that we weren't able to get to. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so I know, and so thank you, Casey, for helping organize all this. Really appreciate it. Casey's a great resource. And if you would put your name and contact information in the chat, Casey, for everyone, so that they know that you are available as a resource to people on the Olympic Peninsula, that would be great. What area do you serve, Casey?
So I cover the South Sound and the Peninsula, so 7 counties, but for this area, it's all Jefferson, Mason, Kitsap, Grays Harbor, Thurston, and Pierce.
Okay, terrific. And my experience has been, Casey has been incredibly responsive. When I reach out to him, he's just been terrific. So thank you. Next up is Jim Buck. Jim, if you don't know, was our representative from our legislative district. He lives out in Joyce. And for how many years were you a rep, Jim,
12.
I think 10?
12.
12, excuse me, I cut you short 2 years. Quite a while, and incredibly knowledgeable. So Jim has got a really interesting background. He was a graduate from West Point, and he was a field artilleryman in the Army for years. And he is someone that really leads through knowledge and also through research. If he takes on an issue, he learns it inside and out and becomes an absolute expert. So we are really lucky to have Jim and his passion where he takes difficult issues and one becomes very familiar with the issues, but then also is great at getting people to get behind that and understand all the nuances. So he right now, his latest is around seismic school safety and has done a lot of research into that space. And so I'm glad he's able to join us. And I didn't know, Jim, if you had any slides, I can share the screen so you can talk about what you've uncovered regarding school seismic safety issues. And I'd personally love to hear about the 5 school districts in our county.
Okay. Well, I don't have any slides. This will probably be a first for Rod Fleck and some of the other people that Buck didn't show up with a PowerPoint, but I did have quite a last 6 months of work. I've spent the last 3 or 4 years working with Ron Cameron down at Emergency Management. Casey Duff, I hope you're going to stay in here for this one. You and the senator need to hear about this. Back in July, I had just finished working on a project to determine how many shelters we needed after an earthquake or some type of an emergency. And I wrote up the findings. It's called Emergency Support Function 6, and turned them in. And Ron comes over and he says, do you know anything about school seismic safety? And I said, no. And he says, well, here's this report. Would you look at it? So I looked at it, and basically the report was the final report to the legislature for a study that was done over a 4-year period. And it found, or it examined 561 school buildings in the state of Washington. And 520 of them were found to be in danger of falling on kids with injury, death, or entrapment during the type of earthquake that we experienced in 2001 with the Nisqually quake. We're not talking about a problem with Cascadia. We're talking about the normal 6.8, 7.2 earthquake that we have in the Puget Sound fault system about every 35 years. So took me about 6 weeks to go through this thing and put it into a format that people could actually understand. It was unfortunately written by scientists for engineers, which means that most moms and pops can't pick the thing up and know what they're looking at. And by Labor Day weekend, my wife and I came up with a program where we sent 4,000 notifications to every school board, every school director, every principal, every homeschool coordinator, every fire chief, every board of fire commissioners, as many PTA people as we could find, and all of the state reps and state senators. We followed that up a week later with a second one that amplified what we had said, and we got a reasonably good response from people. What we wanted to do was make this information available to the public, because when it was put out by DNR on June 30th, there was very little notification to the public, and there was no press coverage. So we fast forward to today. The legislature is considering a couple of different bills. One is House Bill 1775. It's got some problems that I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but there is a Senate Bill 5933 with a House companion that's 2095 that has a lot of potential. Now, to give you an idea of the magnitude that we're talking about, we have 4,400 school buildings in the state. And this study only looked at 561. So that means we've got 3,900 buildings that have to be examined yet. This problem has been recognized in British Columbia, Oregon, and California, and each of those province states have had to spend billions of dollars. It's my estimate that if we had to address this thing right now, it would probably take 15 years and cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 billion. So this is a major issue that we're billion as with B. So that's the issue we're looking at right now. Puget Sound faults go off much more frequently than the Cascadia faults. The point of the spear on all of this is Clallam County, Jefferson County, the Olympic Peninsula, and the coastal portion of Washington. We've got some schools have been studied in Clallam County, but not all of them. Nia Bay, TJ, we understand the problems you have. Forks got a little bit of exposure. Clallam Bay is on the list. Crescent is not. Port Angeles, only Roosevelt was examined and none of the schools in Sequim. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to figure out, first of all, from a life safety standpoint for our children. They need to be able to know that they can go to school and come out of the experience alive. Second thing is, if those schools go down, where's the first place everybody goes after a natural disaster for shelter? They go to a school. If the school's not there, and with the weather conditions we typically have here on the Olympic Peninsula, we could have more casualties from exposure than we have from the actual disaster. So I think it's absolutely essential that we take this seriously. I've asked that we go ahead and extend the survey and make it public and understandable. I think that it's important that we go ahead and combine the seismic retrofit with school modernization. Right now, you can't do school modernization and seismic retrofit at the same time. So if you decide you want to do a modernization, you have to tear all your facade off and do it, put it all back up. And then if you want to do a seismic retrofit, you get to tear all the facade off again and do your retrofit and then put it back up. So that needs to be combined.
So Jim, you know, that I don't know how many people saw that Fox 13 presentation and the new maps that came out from DNR on the Olympic. So if the big one hits, the 9.0, what the impacts will be. They went into tsunami inundation zones with their maps and everything. It was pretty alarming. But if it, you know, and there could be, I know 7-point-something earthquakes, but how would the state prioritize funding? Which schools would come first? And you know, it seems like number one, they need to assess all the buildings. Then number two, look at which ones are the most likely to be a high danger scenario. Is any of that kind of work included in either of the two bills that are being proposed?
No. Right now, the only way that there is no legislative direction that mandates school districts or OSPI to put together a list of threatened schools or the condition they're in. There is a somewhat voluntary list that OSPI maintains called, I can't think of what it's called right this minute. But anyway, and the only way that you enforce people putting information into it right now is they're not eligible to get a school construction grant if they don't update the material. So somebody that either doesn't want to, doesn't have the capability of, or has just decided they're not going to put in for a grant doesn't necessarily have to report the condition of their school. So that's a shortcoming right there. Now, the other thing is, because that is not complete, there has been no requirement that the legislature be informed of just how many schools are in trouble. And you can't make a credible estimate of how much something's going to cost if you don't know how many problems there are. So those are things I think have to be dealt with in coming legislation.
So what do these two bills do then? And why do you not like one of them and you like the other one more?
Well, 1775 duplicates.
That's the House?
That's the House bill. It duplicates two programs that are already in effect that don't require school district matching funds, and replaces it with one that does require a 30% match. And it leaves out Port Townsend, Aberdeen, and Hoquiam. It's limited to 1,000 students. And because it's limited to 1,000 students, the provisions of the bill that apply to the schools involved don't apply to schools with more than 1,000 students.
Okay, okay. So it only covers schools with fewer than 1,000 students.
Right.
And why did they do that cutoff? Because presumably larger schools have more money?
I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't been privileged. I haven't been in on that kind of discussion.
Okay, so you're not a fan of the House bill. And the Senate bill, what does it do?
Well, the Senate bill includes all schools, and it combines the seismic retrofit with the modernization. And what it does, rather than go in and try to start taking money from other projects in the capital budget, it puts a $500 million bond issue on the ballot this coming November. And that's the first real realization that I have seen from anybody in Olympia about the magnitude of this problem. Right now, OSPI is working on funding. I think they've completed one school, and they're working on funding something like 16 or between 16 and 30 other ones. And at that rate, we'll finish in 2068.
Mm-hmm. So I see Jim Stoffers with us, and I hate to put you on the spot, Jim, but Jim is a school board member in Sequim, but he also serves on the WASDA board, so the Washington State School Directors Association. Did I get that right? Jim, the other Jim, not Jim Buck, but Jim Stoffer, has WASDA been talking about this issue, and you know, kind of why is it that Jim Buck is the one raising the alarm on this rather than the leaders of our state?
Thank you. And now Jim Buck, the other Jim there. And I see Jim. We have Jim McIntyre. So we have like a triplet of Jims here. Jim, thank you very much first. And yes, WASDA has been raising this for several years, and we've recently provided testimony to all three of those bills. For SQUEM, it's specifically is the district building, which also houses some of our alternative learning programs. You know, and that building was 1940 era type thing. Our other buildings are pretty much stick. Probably the one that will survive the most is the kindergartner pod out in Grey Wolf, which was a cross-laminated project that we got. And Jim Buck is correct on this 1775. It's for students with less than 1,000 FTE or students. So school districts like Quilcene, Brennan, Crescent, Cape Flattery in our area. And then the Senate bill is that $5 million grant. All of these, of course, there's always that caveat that a school district has to pass a bond to access these funds and other funds, which is that super majority. So that's tied into some of the discussions that are occurring right now. But yeah, we're engaged. And I know Casey, who's still on here, he has an email because yesterday School Director Association had talked with Senator Cantwell's office on the other Washington side and sent those things also. But yes, great concern. When it happens, where do people go to shelter? Yes, schools. We're also working here in the county, and thanks to Jim, we have a trying to start a work group for the schools specifically. And I think Jim has that email too. That Mark Ozias had reached out to us. So we have the superintendents and the legislative reps from each of the 5 school districts in Clallam County participating in that. And this is a short session, as everybody knows. So we're in 2.5 weeks now, and trying to move some of these items far enough along that they can then become even a bigger item during the long session the following year. But we hope some funding. The thing that I really appreciate about the 5933 is that it puts it on the ballot for a vote by the people, and not just legislative action. It takes it to everybody to vote on, and so hope that moves forward. Question
for you, Jim Buck. So the Senate bill proposes $500 million going to the vote of the people, but you're saying it's a $6 billion need. So is it that would be a pool of funding that school districts could use if they pass some local component? Is that right?
That's correct. And
so, but I mean, we've proven through the McAleer process that communities that are not as wealthy don't pass school bonds at the same rate that the 60%, is what you have to achieve to pass it. So wouldn't it be that just the wealthy school districts will get that money, and school districts that have a higher poverty level will be voting no, or school districts that have a bunch of retirees? And that's not equitable to students.
No, I think that's one of the main objections I've got to the whole system right now, is that basically you have to pass a bond before you know how much the job is going to cost, which I think is unrealistic, especially if you live in Quilcene or Brennan or, some of the poor communities we have in the state.
Or Sequim or Port Angeles that don't pass school bonds.
Well, and there's that too. I think also you need to understand, you have a state that has mandated that kids have to go to a school, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you have a state that controls the purse strings and basically can hold the voters hostage. So no wonder nobody wants to go to 50%. They don't trust the process. So I think it's important for you to understand. Somebody made a comment last week at one of the hearings that, yeah, these school districts have to have some skin in the game. Well, I'll tell you who our skin in the game is. They go to class every day in these schools. And the state has a responsibility that if it's going to go ahead and mandate the kids have to go to a building, then they're going to have to take the responsibility that they survive the experience. And they're not doing that right now. The whole school funding mechanism is dysfunctional for handling a problem like this. Now, we know that we've got 4,400 schools left, or buildings in the state. We know 520 of them are in trouble. We don't know about the rest of the 3,900. I see that somebody asked a question about, will schools needed to be retrofitted if they were built before the earthquake codes came in? Yes, they will. And that gives us a point of how we have to go to Olympia and start talking to them. We don't know the scope of the problem yet. We know we have a problem. We know it's bad, and we're not taking it seriously enough to address the thing outside of the business as usual status quo school funding issue that we've used for years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was put together before this issue came to light. My guess is the Wahkiakum case will go the same way as the McAleer case.
What's the Wahkiakum case?
Okay, the Wahkiakum case is a small school district down on the Columbia River. And pretty much what they did is they sued the state on December 30th, using McAleer as the basis, saying that if McAleer says that the primary duty of the state is education, then you can't do education in a building that's falling down around you or is old and outdated and unsafe. So the McAleer case should also apply to education infrastructure. I think that is when things really started to get a second look at Olympiad. Jim, would you agree with that?
Yes. McClym is also in what we call one of the encumbered lands areas, because they don't have a source of revenue to fund other, and so there's the three counties down there. I also add that it was a bill last year, and I don't have it, but DNR is the one that conducts these surveys, and because on their geological side of their house, and so some funding has come via these previous bills that supported those studies, and so I think that might be in some of this language again too, because to continue the studies, DNR needs funding. Where does DNR get their funding from? Harvesting the trees and then management of the other natural resources throughout the state. So it is not just a basic, simple. It's pretty complex here. And thank you, Rod, for your comment over there. I don't consider a 59.5% approval rate to a 40 non-approval rate as a loss. We were short 50 votes. So there's plenty of other discussions in why we didn't get those 50 votes. But thank you, Rod, for your input there. Always appreciate it.
So Colleen, the point that Jim made about the passing the bonds and having DNR do the studies. DNR does the geological studies. They got $540,000 in the supplemental budget or in the budget last year to continue what's called the seismic school safety project, which was started 4 years ago. And that's the final report that came out on June 30th. They got $540,000 to continue that, but there was no language in the budget that told them that they had to report it to the public. It gets reported to the school district involved and OSPI, and possibly to the legislature. You can say that because we put it on the DNR website that it's been made public, but it took me and Donna 6 weeks to put this thing into a readable format.
Mm-hmm.
So they have the money, but there's no requirement that they come out and make it readable for the public.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's not a sexy issue, right? You got buildings that look fine but if there is a major earthquake, they could collapse, and it's not a brand new shiny building. And so it's not something that, I myself, if I had a problem with my house, I can't see what the fix is going to be, it's all internal, I'm not going to be excited about spending money on that. For me, it's like, getting your tooth repaired or getting new tires. That is not a fun way to spend money. I'd much rather go get a new pair of shoes or 20, right? So it's, I get that it's a problem, but it's a safety issue, and long-term it's a responsible thing to do. And right now, our state has more money in surplus than they've ever had. Is that fair? I think that's correct. And so, yeah, I think that now is probably the time to deal with this, but there's a long line of folks that want to spend money on issues, to include things like transportation, that are also very necessary. So how do you see this in the pecking order of priorities for capital infrastructure funding?
Well, for this year, I don't see very much. It's a short session. You're not going to make policy decisions. But I do think it's important to bring this issue to the public and to the moms and pops whose kids are going to these schools. Is, in emergency management, we have 4 things that we have to do when we have a disaster. First thing is life safety. The second thing is to protect property. The third thing is to protect the environment. And the fourth thing is to protect the economy. So right now, we have a system that does not put life safety first. And to a certain extent, it only puts part of the property into contention. I would think that it would be a very good thing for the legislature to put together an interim committee to investigate all of what is going on here and propose legislation in 2023. Because if they don't start now, by the time they get down to Olympia, it'll just be another year of, oh, we're too busy, and another year of excuses for not doing anything. This needs to have action during the interim, with pre-filed legislation ready to go when they open the gates next year.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. So I'm sure you'll be continuing this and trying to highlight this issue throughout the session and in between session. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more about it over the next few months. So thank you for all your volunteerism and your diligent work on the subject.
Thank you, Colleen.
You're very welcome. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording.